almost like you're playing powerful tennis, but need to have the soft game in your back pocket to activate when necessary. And I'll say that's definitely a gap where Angela and I talk about this ability to adapt or adaptability in general. Angela loves this concept, which I love too, that just resonates with me, of like molding like clay, right? So the question that I'm going to throw out there is, when you're teaching a player, are you having them go in with a very rigid game plan, or are you giving them things to look for that allows them to be that clay and really mold in the moment? All right, Sky Kim, thanks for joining us today. A question that I like to ask a lot of our guests is, who is Sky Kim? If you were to tell me who you are, who is Sky Kim?
Who is Sky Kim? Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, glad to be here. And who is Sky Kim? I guess this.
Tell me who Sky Kim is today. And
Today.
then, yeah. What are you
Well,
doing today?
I was gonna say fail first. Since this is a fail first podcast, um, I want to say I'm a failed professional tennis player.
I love that.
Because I didn't reach the goal that I initially wanted to get to, in my family. But right now, I am the founder and the CEO of Road to Pro Incorporation, and I'm a ATP tour coach, or former ATP tour coach. I want to do it right now, but my company's busy and my company needs me right now, so I'm not doing the touring. But I do coach on the side. I coach some juniors, and if pros need my help, I do work with the pros as well. Yeah.
Awesome. So from our previous discussions, there's a lot that happened in your life to lead you to where you are today, right?
Yeah.
What were some of those life-changing moments that really led you to Road to Pro today? Because when we talked about your prior history, you definitely had some adversity in there, definitely had some failures, definitely had some other things that really changed your path. So what were some of those life-changing moments that you had?
I think the life-changing moment that I had recently, the most recent one, was the reason why I made Road to Pro, the company Road to Pro, is because at the time I was traveling with a player in Korea. He used to be number one, but his ranking dropped, and he was like 150 in the world, and his ranking dropped to 600 because of an injury. He was trying to come back, but he just couldn't, it wasn't the same. So he took me on as a coach, and we went back to actually we broke his ranking of 150, top 150. He was 125 at the time when I was with him, and for a year we did great. We worked super hard, and he got up to 125 in the world. And the next year we're going to work even harder, have fun at the same time, but work harder to reach top 100. And after the day after we talked, we found out that his sponsorship was going to be cut for next year. So he wasn't going to have the financial backing that he had, because he didn't reach the top 100 within that year. So I was really devastated. Like I was really upset. My player that I really took care of him, and I thought he was going to make it, but no matter how good of a coach I am or how hard I worked, if we didn't have the financial backing, the players couldn't go anywhere. So I came back to the States. At the time I was in Korea, and I told my boss, and at the company that I was working for, they were sponsoring this player. They said, we're not going to have the sponsorship for him. So I came back to the States, and I went into soul searching mode. And I was like, I'm trying my best to become the best coach that I can be. but without any, financial backings, it would be hard to help any players because, especially in Korea, it's tough to get a sponsorship there. So I decided to make this company, which is called Road to Pro, to help players, get to the pro level. So what I initially thought was having this ecosystem, trying to come up with great products, and with those profits, we could sponsor players or give them sponsorships, and they would be able to travel, and they would be doing the marketing for us, and then we'll get more sales, and then that having that healthy ecosystem, I thought would be great. So that's why I started. I have no business background. I have I have no engineering background, but I just knew tennis, and I played tennis like over 30 years. So yeah, I started making unique gear that I've never seen before, and I've worked with some materials that was not in tennis yet. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I got lucky, and that this is where where I am right now. So yeah.
So tell us, because what I want to elaborate on is, so I'm actually gonna take this off of my foot right now because I'm wearing them. I refuse to wear any other sock.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really, what I want to get into is you've developed with no engineering backgrounds. This is pretty impressive. Some high quality products beyond the socks. There's a few others, right?
Uh-huh.
But let's talk about the sock first. Where did you come up with the idea of the sock? Because
Well, I used to have a lot of toenail bruising. I
yeah,
didn't have much blisters on the bottom of my foot. I that wasn't when I was younger. I had issues, but like when I became pro, I that wasn't less of an issue. But I always had toenail bruising, and I always lost my toenails,
mm,
and it's one of the most painful things ever. Like I would have like a 3-hour match in the semifinals, and then the finals. I couldn't even the day after. I couldn't even put my feet into the shoes because it was I was in pain, and for the first set, I would be like just barely able to walk. And then after the first set, it would be I would forget about the pain, so I would start to come back. But that first set, if you're down a set, it's tough to come back.
yeah,
So yeah, so I hated having that problem, and I reached out to the company in Korea, and they actually were developing these socks for soccer. So I asked them, "Hey, can you develop something for tennis?" And they said, "Yeah, why not?" And so I talked with them and said what we needed, and we co-developed the socks for tennis, which works great for pickleball too.
yeah.
It actually works great for every sport.
It's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
And I would say, like, as much as right, tennis is a lot of lateral movement.
Mhm,
Pickleball, the second part of that is there's a lot of deceleration both vertically
mhm,
and horizontally.
mhm.
So for me, the reason that now I refuse to wear any other sock, and I say this to Angela all the time, we're practicing and I'm like, these socks are awesome, is because usually I'm pretty fast. And if there's any skill set that I have over most people on the court, and Angelo says this all the time, he's like, I don't even know how you got to that ball. So with me flying into corners, I would slide around in my shoe like crazy. And
Yeah,
so I tried
it's
a thicker sock. Thicker sock didn't work,
yeah,
right? I tried
mhm,
a thinner sock, smaller shoe,
uh,
tried so many things, right?
yeah,
But when
uh,
I saw the socks, and you could tell me more about like the grip that's on the bottom of these,
uh-huh,
because
uh-huh.
it's inside and outside the sock too.
Yes,
My
yes,
foot does not move at all anymore.
yeah,
It's the best thing I've ever done.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Thanks for the feedback,
You got it.
and that's exactly what we were going for. And when I was playing, I mean, I've tried so many different socks as well. I mean,
So
um,
is Angelo, and he's got
yeah, it's just
Angelo's got
I
some
mean.
big feet, big feet. So
And tennis players always have problems with their feet. It's always sliding around inside the shoes. And one of the problems that I had with those thicker socks, it had great cushioning, but the thing is, it would get hot and my feet
mm,
would get wet. and sweaty, and like it would slide around inside the socks. So it would be fine because it was so tightly fit inside the shoes. But the thing is, once it got wet, once my feet got wet and sweaty, like it would slide around inside the socks. And actually, that was worse than socks sliding, inside the shoes, actually.
Yeah.
So, and not only is it uncomfortable, but the thing is, like, I would be getting cramps because of that, like because I was overworking my feet and my calves when my feet were sliding around inside the shoes. So that went out the door. And I just had to go with what a lot of tennis players did, go with two layers of socks. And I was very picky about that, like any tennis player or pickleball player. I think they're picky with socks too, and it had to be the first layer had to be very, very thin and very compressed to my feet, and then the second layer was what had the cushioning, but it still had to be conformed to my feet because I didn't want the first and second layer to slide around. So I had I was very sensitive to all these changes when I was playing. So yeah, I had to pick the right first layer and then the right second layer. So it was I think a lot of tennis players are mental. So but I had that. I mean, I could feel it. So I needed those the socks to be right. And when I co-developed these socks, with the company in Korea, I didn't need two socks anymore. It was enough cushioning, and we have the insoles that cover for the shocks, so we have the insoles for that, and for the socks it didn't slide around, so we have the dual non-slip on both sides, which is the polyurethane, kind of like the material for the grips.
And you can't
So,
feel it at all.
no, you can't feel it at all, and it's sliced very, very thin, and it's put in on the inside and the outside of the socks. So yeah.
Because like the reason that I mentioned that is because originally when I got the socks, the first thing you think of is like, am I going to feel this on my foot, right?
Oh, right.
Because a great reference is like if anybody's tried on like a medical sock, right, where you have the grips, you can feel that grip on the sock, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The fact that you can't feel these at all and your foot's not sliding around, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And then a whole nother utility that we could talk about is I've actually been wearing them in the gym. So I'm like a barefoot guy when I work out, try and strengthen my feet, my ankles, etc. And usually I have to wear plain socks. And you still slide because your feet get sweaty. You don't necessarily, whatever your gym's laid with, sometimes it's a little slick. So I will tell you, I don't know if you even thought of this application, but I've been wearing them in the gym to lift because I'm barefoot anyways. The best thing I could have done.
I've heard that before. I've heard that before. I think it's a thing now. I think a lot of people that go to the gym and do lifts and do weights, they actually go barefoot, and I've heard feedback where it's great for lifting.
Awesome.
And yeah, it was surprising for me because I didn't know, and all these different applications, like hockey players actually reached out to us and said like these socks are awesome for hockey. Like
me thinking about that now,
yeah.
I grew up playing hockey. Hockey is my main sport.
Oh, nice.
So your boot is pretty big. It's like people don't realize how much space is in the boot. So when you talk about it in tennis, the tough part about hockey is if you're a skater who likes a loose boot, think about how much harder the toe is on the front of the skate than a sneaker. So you're smashing sometimes that toe, especially if you pick a skate by accident or you're stopping hard on the side. Like your feet sometimes are smashing into the front of there. So I could see how the hockey application is even greater because of how rigid the boot is.
Actually, I had another idea for a product, and I think I should talk to you about that
Yeah.
after the podcast.
We will. We'll talk about that after the podcast.
Yeah.
So either way, like the socks are awesome. The socks are absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and we just launched the black versions of the socks, and in October we're coming out with the youth socks. And the thing is, when we had the white socks, the original ones, people were asking for black ones because they have dark shoes and they didn't want to wear white socks. And then the most request that we got after that was, hey, do you provide any youth socks? My kid's playing, and he or she is like 8 to 12, and they're like top athletes, but we're trying to look for socks that work for them, but no one's providing it. So hey, why not make it? So
Yeah.
right away we invested in designing and doing a extra smalls for the youth size. So so that's coming out in late October.
That's awesome. And I will tell you, so the last thing to comment, since you could tell that I'm fired up about these socks because they've been changing for me, like absolutely game changing for me on the court. I have been at PPA events for pickleball, and I've had people just walk up to me and say, like, not even knowing there's grips on them, just walk up and be like, yo, dude, where'd you get those socks?
Oh, really?
I swear to God, just because of the style. So, and I know it's because the ankle here is so snug to your foot that it looks sleek and not bulky. So like a lot of people, when you wear like a standard Nike high top sock, it slides down, it moves, right? You know how it crinkles? Like a high top sock,
right.
it crinkles.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it stretches and it looks loose. Because these are so snug to your ankle, I just had like casual people walk up to me like, hey, where'd you get those socks? Those are my socks. Swear to God.
Nice. I'm glad you noticed all that. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of compression, so it doesn't slide, on. Yeah, I mean, long time ago, this was probably like 30 years ago, when I had those Nike socks, or those loose socks. Oh man, it's the worst feeling ever, especially on your ankles, like above your ankles. If it's loose, like it kind of goes underneath the shoes, like those loose parts, and and it just feels horrible. And I think one more thing, like you said, the medical socks that have like the little bubble silicones on the bottom, like those, I've tried those. And the thing is, like, when you really run on these hard courts, even clay, like you could feel those bubbles. So that would actually cause the blisters, because it's raised up, and you're pressing down on it, and you would slide around, because those are not inside the shoes, or inside the socks actually. So it's on the outside, and you would press on it, and it would hurt actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of thought went into the socks. I mean, every product that we have, we put a lot of thought into it, time, and a lot of testing too. A lot of feedback. I know you don't play tennis, right? But I mean, the dampeners that we have, initially they were 5 grams, and people actually complain about how heavy the dampener is, like different types of dampeners, how heavy it is. And it was initially 5 grams, but we actually had to cut 1 gram off the dampener, and so we had to make it thinner, to make that happen. And that was actually really tough. And yeah, it's a lot
Angelo,
of
for
work.
you,
Yeah.
Angelo, for you as a tennis player, how does the dampener really change the way that the racket responds for you? Because I can't relate to it as much.
I used to play when I played D1 college. I used to play with dampeners, but then I stopped playing with dampeners because I wanted the kinesthetic awareness of whether or not I was hitting on a sweet spot. Have a dampener, even though the comfort level goes up, the awareness level goes down. So I found it just kind of blending in. I mean, it's solid for recreational players, and then Agassi used to just use an elastic band and just, as Sky, tie it up. But I went away from comfort and more for performance.
Yeah, and I think people really ask about that to us, and then I agree with that. And the thing is, I used to love the feel of the dampener. I just couldn't stand the ping on the noise of it when I was younger, and I used the regular dampeners. I was sponsored by Prince, so I used the regular P dampener, and I was fine with that. But I do agree on that. It does deaden the string bed a lot more, but what we did with the Sorbothane and the material that we had was we didn't want to sacrifice the feel of the hits. So it actually took 2 years to develop that feel, because we actually kept on asking the feedback of how it felt. And initially, when I actually made the dampener or experienced that material on my racket, I actually thought it was horrible. Like I couldn't feel anything. Like I hit the frame and I couldn't feel any vibration right up the racket to my arm. So like I was like, this is an amazing material, but how am I gonna make it so that it feels better than without the dampener or with the dampener? So that's why it took 2 years to develop. Tinkering with the feel. We actually tested uh, uh, 200 types of plastic, because the plastic itself, when we put it on, it actually changed the feel of it. And what we found out was, it's actually very interesting. Like I know people don't get into much how, like, dampeners uh, change the feel or the performance of it. But when we used a certain type of plastic, it made a higher pitch vibration. And when we used a certain different type of plastic, it made a certain deeper uh, sounding vibration. So the interesting thing was, when it was a higher pitched noise, when we put on these plastic, it actually made the feel better. But the thing is, it would hurt my joints actually. And then when we use the plastic that would have a lower pitch sound, it would have a deeper pop. So it was pretty satisfying. But the thing was, the vibration actually was making my arms sore. So the muscles sore. So we had to find the right balance of vibration, where it couldn't be too high of a pitch or too low of a pitch. So I mean, there's so many things that we actually put into our dampener. Like people really think like, wow, like this dampener is so expensive, or this is a scam. But like we really, really worked hard to get that specific feel and specific pain away from our arm. And we've done a lot of testing. Obviously, I'm not going to say it's going to work for everybody, and people, a lot of people don't like the feel of dampeners, but we put a lot of work into it to make it feel more like a traditional dampener, because the effect of the material was so good.
Are you
Yeah.
teasing? Are you teasing a possible pickleball solution for all those people out there with high amounts of pickleball elbow these days and wrist problems?
Oh, I think tennis, the vibration has something to do with the pain that you get. But the thing
Mm,
is, I think pickleball is more of just swing through the air, and the pickleball itself is not very heavy. So like when you're whipping your arm like that
mm.
super fast, I think that comes from more technical aspect of your swing,
Yeah.
rather than actual the vibration of the contact.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I
So
find
let's.
I pain in pickleball. I don't have pain, but people like Coach do is either the wrong technique, the wrong grip, or too high of a grip tension.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's a little different from tennis, people who write bad comments on our on our ads for the shock sword, the dampener. They really think that I don't, I just wanted to make money and just make this cool looking, or
Mm.
good sounding dampener. But a lot of work went into this, and we do have a guarantee. Like if it doesn't work for you, we give you your money back.
Yeah.
And for me, it's about helping people. It's not trying to scam you for money. It's if it doesn't work for you, really, like it's fine. We'll happily give your money back, because if it doesn't work for you, then you don't need it. So
Yeah. And I think that's where you let off. Like the whole reason that you even started Road to Pro was you had a player that didn't really have what they needed
right.
to be successful, and you started it trying to find ways to help athletes be successful on their journey to pro.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks for itself on the purpose behind why you actually created Road to Pro in the first place. So let's do something fun here now that we're talking about coaching, because we have a couple of coaches on this call. So I'm sure everybody is like, you know what can we learn today? Right.
Yeah. I was very interested what Angela would say about mental side of things. And
Yeah.
I've actually written 2 books. One was for technique, and one was more of not mental, but it was more about comparing tennis to warfare, which was initially written by Sun Tzu, like the Chinese military tactician. And it was very interesting when I read that, because it was very similar to tennis in the mindset and the strategic and the tactical aspect of it. So I did a book comparing the two. And I would really want to deep dive what Angelo has to say about certain situations and strategic aspects. I'm super excited to learn.
Yeah. So I will lead it off by saying I love that concept, truthfully, because I could see how it can apply. Can you give us some insight onto when you related those two things? How did it come together in a book?
I don't know. For me, it was kind of easy to see because I went through that lifestyle, actually. Like my parents came, like our family came to the States for me to become pro. So I never had the option of, playing tennis recreationally.
Yeah.
So my mindset was always, at the elite level of tennis, or, elite, that top level. So, and comparing the warfare and tennis was it came easy to me because it was just more of a professional lifestyle, even when I was younger. And my coaches always talked about killer instinct, and the more I trained, the more killer instinct I was able to uh, get. I don't know, I should say get from the
Yeah.
training, because I didn't want to lose. Like there's too much in stake, because I went through all this training, playing. I know some coaches, they say you shouldn't be playing more than 6 hours, but I played 8 to 12 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
And like all that training, it makes your mind really different. And you went through too much to lose. So it means a lot more to you. And some of the kids that played 2-3 hours a day, it really didn't mean that much. So it didn't matter for them if they lost sometimes. So
It sounds like it was almost like survival in a way. Like
yeah, it
survival
was.
of the fittest. So I know that Angelo over there is patiently waiting, because I know that you said a few things that he instantly had a few comments on. But the reason that I wanted to set up Angelo for that is because he has a certain thought process when it becomes, why you are playing in general, and the way that you go about playing. So you talked about killer instinct there.
Huh?
Some of that Angelo has actually gone against the grain on a little bit, but employs people to use
Yes.
it short term. So Ange, give us some of the insight on there, based off of what Sky commented on.
Yeah, and I also want to say, Sky, thanks for the insight on how you developed the dampener. Because a lot of tennis players are going to react the way I did.
Of course, I was the same way.
Yeah,
I was one of them too. So
I mean, I was a sports marketing, major. What I would suggest for you is you should market saying something like, I know what you're going to say, but that's why we spent, 2,000 versions using X number of versions of plastic to be able to work on the comfort, the sound, the feel, the playability. Anyways, I would go into that piece of it, the scientific piece. I think that's really intriguing, and I would love to try one. I think that's pretty exciting that you thought that deep into it. And
I got a couple to give you.
remedied that potential problem. So a misperception really is a misperception. So going back to, yes, so that's great, and the art of war and things like that, and even Mike Tyson has said everyone can have a strategy until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
So, and that's what tennis feels like, but isn't like. Because there's no physical contact, there's no actual harm that the opponent is going to elicit on you, whether they have a big forehand or serve. What I've found is, because I'm not a big believer in the term peak performance, because the peak performance implies you got there once, like your peak, the highest point you can get.
Right.
Rather than flow state, you know, where you are aligned with your purpose and your passion. There's no nerves and you're right where you need to be and you're completely present. So I think it has more to do with being present, and where, you know, I'm removing the word fight or battle from my coaching vocabulary, and I'm replacing it with compete. And how I ask that, I just had a mental skills session with the UConn women's tennis team yesterday. They're a D1 school, and you know, I'm talking about that your opponent is not your enemy. They're your practice partner when you're keeping score. And the reason why I say that is you got to use that person, or if it's doubles, that doubles team, to draw out of you your best tennis rather than fight. And even with ALW, you know, Annalie Waters, she says, fight, fight, fight when she's trying to build momentum. And I even put a comment on one of the posts I saw. I would just say, compete, compete, compete. I would rather she say the word compete. It's not a fight, because a fight, you're defeating the opponent. No, you're actually trying to play your best. So the question I'll ask both of you is, let's say it's a huge point, match point, set point, break point. Do you secretly hope your opponent double faults? Yes or no?
Of course, yes.
Oh, yeah. So I used to play like that, and I used to coach like that. Now no longer. It's a cop-out if you secretly want your opponent to fail because it's not bringing out the best in you. But rather, what I say is, you know what? Give me your best serve. Give me your best serve, because I'm going to show you that I'm going to take your best serve and hit my best return when it counts. And there's Jeff Greenwald, who is big into the mental game, and he did some stuff with Craig O'Shaughnessy, Novak Djokovic's mental skills coach. And so that was cool that you went, you know, head to head on the upset and won. I think that's really cool. But you know, with Jeff Greenwald, he told me this story, you know, when he was he and I had a keynote at this event in Arizona, and he told the story of where he had match point against his arch rival. He had match point in a final set tiebreak, and his opponent, something like swore or did something on the point right before match point, and it was a point penalty, and he was awarded the match. He gave it back. He said, "No, I do not want to win that way." And the umpire said, "But you won the match." No, I want him to serve again. I don't want to take the match that way. And luckily, he ended up winning. But you know, so it reminds me of that. Is you want to secretly hope to get the best performance from your opponent, because that's going to draw out your best performance. You're going to get better because you're not playing for the win. You're playing for the improvement.
So I like to counter argue this with Angelo, because as you can probably relate in tennis and I relate in pickleball, there is moments where I am in there and I need to tell myself to attack. Now, I usually say attack rather than fight. However, if I sat in that moment and reflected and just was thankful to be there, I've noticed that it kind of kicks me out to having the will to win, right? It takes me out of the state of wanting to fight, wanting to win, wanting to attack. Now, what kicks me into that is that fighting, competitive attack nature. Now, there's the argument to be had that I grew up in that athletic environment because in hockey, so many things are fueled by physical contact. You get your clock, like you absolutely get clocked in the corner, coming across center ice. Your adrenaline's now going and you're ready to attack back, right? Pickleball has a little bit more patient style to it. However, I don't know, Sky, how you are in those moments, and I'll let you comment on this, but at least me in a moment, if I'm up 10-9, games on the line, balls in my hand, me trying to be peaceful about that moment and saying, you know what, I'm just thankful to be here, and then serving is a little bit more challenging for me to then say, I need to attack here, win this game, and then move forward. You know what I'm saying?
I would jump in there, Al, and
Yeah.
say that's a tactic versus a purpose. They're two different
Okay.
things. So you don't attack with purpose. So, and you don't future think with, well, why am I here? It's now your X's and O's at that point. And that's just, if attacking is, so I would say it's being peacefully aggressive. If attacking is the way that brings out your best pickleball, then that's what it is. But I've seen a lot of players that attack out of fear.
Oh yeah, of course.
Totally.
Fight or freeze and the 3 F's, and it's like so. I would say, are you attacking for the right reasons or the wrong reasons?
And
yeah,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think sometimes I talk about that in tennis where, I say different things to different players because it's a matter of what they need. But sometimes the kids who are attacking too much and too aggressively thinking, they have to attack too much. I tell them, like, when you're going out, let's say for, a lot of kids play games these days. So when you're playing Call of Duty or whatever, and you have a machine gun, like when you're shooting a machine gun, you're actually, a lot of times you're shooting the machine gun for defensive purposes and not for offensive purposes. So you're shooting like everywhere and you have no aim. It's just going everywhere. So your teammate could, actually get some cover and go somewhere, right? So that's not actually an attack. It's actually defense, So what you're feeling on the court, you're actually very defensive when you're trying to attack without a purpose. So then I talk about, how strategically you have to attack. You have to pinpoint your attacks, and it has to be a certain speed, and then that's how you anticipate your opponent's moves. And that's how I talk about that. And it's, snipers are more of an attack because, they're actually attacking and pinpointing. And so I tell them, you're actually pinpointing like a sniper, but on a very fast level. So, that's how I talk about, when someone is too aggressive, that's what I say to them. So it's a little different. And I think, and I love these kind of deep conversations where I know we're going to have our differences, but I think, we're all talking about the same thing and how we should approach as a different player. And, different mindsets need different verbal languages and words. So I think it's great. Like, having this conversation is awesome. Yeah.
And Angela and I talk about that all the time. It's like, not only is it like unique to that person, but it's also unique to that day, right? Because you as an individual can be feeling completely different the day of that event than the night before when you went to bed.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's
super important to emphasize that uniqueness to yourself in that day. And that's something that Angelo has definitely amplified to me as a whole. To summarize, though, I just want to break this down into really 3 different categories for anybody listening. So a lot of what I was talking about and Sky was just talking about is inter-gameplay, meaning when you are playing the game, how are you navigating the game itself? What Angelo briefed on a little bit is, why the hell are you there in the first place? Why are you doing what you're doing? Really, because you're operating from a place of purpose. Just like what Sky talked about with even starting Road to Pro, he started because there's a whole purpose behind it, and it's what's really driving him to do it every single day. Even before we started the call, he was telling me about the long hours he put in this week.
Oh my
And
God.
but then, like, right, reflecting on why you're putting in those long hours, it's because the purpose that is driven behind it. So there's the three different categories I want to get into is you have really why you're doing what you're doing, like before an event actually occurs. You have the event itself, so whatever match, game, etc. that you have. And then you have post-match, right? You have the reflection process, what you can learn from it, what you could take away from it, even reflecting on why you just went through that ass kicking you went through in the first place, right? So continuing on to like tactically in gameplay, something that I wanted to ask both of you, and maybe Sky will have you pick up tennis and Angel will have you pick up pickleball, and we can kind of bounce back and forth. We'll give a standard example. We have what would be in pickleball a 3-0 player, very similar correlation to tennis. You're a beginner, maybe you picked up a racket a little bit before, hit the ball around, but nothing too crazy. What is one key component that they can start with today that they can go apply that's going to improve their gameplay? And I'm not talking tactically, right? Or I'm talking more tactically than technically. Because technically we could work on little intricate tweaks to your swing, but I'm a firm believer. Yeah, right.
As a 3-0, you have a bunch of stuff to work on. So you don't want to think about that when you're thinking about strategy or playing it.
So if you're having too many swing thoughts in that, right? Give me one thing tactically that they can go out there and employ that is going to help them improve their game.
Yeah, this is great. I love this question, and I'm actually building an AI for tennis in Korea. So
I love it.
The software team and the developers actually asked me, like, so what are you good at? They asked me, like, what are you good at? And I said, I'm good at strategy and, I'm good at strategy and tactics, but I'm very good at making that happen with the technical background. So I teach my players these technique, and then I'll teach them how to use these technique into applying these strategies, and it gets a lot of fun because you're technically sound, and a lot of times it's working, and now you only have to apply mental skills where your strategy and using your tactics. But the thing is, like, they asked me, like, oh, that's awesome, like, so that's very special of you can do that. And I'm like, that's great, but like they asked me, like, is this going to be useful for recreational players? And I'm like, no, because they don't have the shots. And they're like, oh, then how are we going to make this tennis AI? And I'm like, this is not useful for a 3-0 player because they can't pinpoint shots. They don't have the technical game to actually put that into strategy. And and they said, so what's the best strategy to win? And I'm like, just get the ball in and play. Just have a huge target. Just don't miss. And that's the first thing. And the thing is, like, that's kind of, I love these kind of conversations. And when you're I don't care if you're a 3-0 tennis player, 3-0 badminton player, who actually asked me like a couple weeks ago, hey, you're a tennis coach, but I'm having trouble. Like I have too much tension, and I'm so nervous going into this tournament. So what should I think about before I play the first match? And I said, just hit everything down the middle. Just hit everything down the middle. Let your opponent do the thing, and you're just reacting to whatever your opponent is doing, at least for the first couple points. And he said he won the tournament, actually. He said he applied that into every one of his game because he was nervous. And he said, like, he could see the target a lot bigger now, and he wasn't missing, and the guy was missing for him, and he didn't even do anything. And when something did happen, he was able to react to that. I don't particularly teach that way in the higher level, but in the lower levels, the best thing to do is especially in the start of the match, have a bigger target, maybe towards the center, because they might be as nervous as you are. And a lot of times you're playing around the same level, and let them, just got to put a lot of balls in and play to build your confidence in that match and for that day, actually, like you said. and go from there. Because you've been, 3-0, 4-0, you've been playing for quite a bit, and it's okay to start a little bit easier. You don't have to have a certain strategy. It's okay to make things simple, and that's what coaches do, actually make things simple for the players, not make it complicated.
Exactly. And that's exactly, to that point, that's exactly why I gave you the question, because I think so many beginners get lost in like, I have to try and learn all these things at once.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a lot of them get lost in like where to start. So coming from where I started in pickleball was I started between 2.5 and 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell you something that is important for everybody to know is the tactics and the way that you play at 5.0 is not the same at 3.0.
Oh,
not
of course.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Right. And I can only imagine that it's the same thing in tennis, because what you talked about, and actually Dane Gingrich, who is a well-known pickleball coach in the space.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's in Santa Barbara, actually. He had a post today that was so true that's on this topic. So he talked about at the high level, attacking at and through your opponents, not around them. And the reason being is because oftentimes at 5.0 and even in some of these pro qualifiers, you have guys that are giving you space on purpose. So it's a completely different tactic, because if you're playing 3.0 and there's space, the likelihood that it's actually space between them to take that shot in doubles, I'm talking about doubles, is high, right? They're not baiting you usually at the 3.0 level. As soon as you get to the top, they're giving you that space because they want you to hit the ball there and then take it out of the counter attack, right?
Yeah.
So it's a completely different thought process and completely different strategy. And now you're totally playing chess over checkers.
Yes.
But you're not going to get there if you try and think that way at 3.0, because the space is there for you. So you're putting yourself in a bind anyways. But Angelo, I want to give you time to speak as well, from your perspective on if someone, same question, if someone is starting out, just getting involved, not a technical piece, but a tactical piece, really, where do they start? Is it the same thing as tennis, which were Sky gave, or is it a little bit different in pickleball? Because I'll say pickleball, the barrier for entry when it comes to skill is much smaller, right? You have more margin for error. The ball does not fly nearly as far or as fast on a miss hit as it does in tennis, right? So give us some insight on where you would start tactically.
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, I agree in every word that Sky just said about the correlation of strategy, tactics, and technique. I'm on the exact same page as that. The place the ball in large targets when you're on the beginner end, and keep it up the middle, large targets, and then make your targets more precise as you get better. And then with pickleball, I mean, it's similar. The difficulty I find with pickleball and tennis is topspin is much easier to generate in tennis than in pickleball. And in pickleball, you're more exposed on improper technique on topspin. And in tennis, you can kind of muscle it and get away with certain things and still make it happen. Not that that's a good thing. Pickleball, you cannot close the paddle face, and you can't cover the ball. You can't shift your body weight or your head, because the pickleball is so light that at least the tennis ball has more weight to it. So you have to make a little bit more of a mistake with your mechanics to make a mistake, to hit an error. In pickleball, it's more precise. Going to your question, as far as what you can do, it's the same thing. Refine technique, and then as you improve your technique, then add tactics and strategies. So, for example, in pickleball, if you can't do a cross-court forehand dip, and it never dips, then don't hit cross court. I don't know. You're going to get your partner slammed, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that's where I find it so fascinating, like with James Ignatowicz, doing a clinic with him, and, his hand speed is unbelievable. And his reach over the non-volley zone is incredible. So he could topspin balls that us mere mortals just have no prayer at even touching, never mind rolling. So when a beginner, let's say a 3.0, 3.5 pickleball player, tries to play like Ben Johns, it's disastrous because they don't have the tools in the toolbox. It's kind of like going to a job site as a carpenter and all you have is a Phillips head screwdriver. It's not going to work. I mean,
Yeah.
can't muscle that and make it work.
Yeah, sorry. Like I just did a YouTube video where 2 weeks ago I said tennis is very much like a chess game, but the thing is, the difference between chess and tennis is because in chess, both of you have the same amount of pieces and same amount of same skill sets, I should say. So they, the pieces that you have, it moves in a certain way, but both of you have that. But in tennis, it's kind of like chess, but you could be missing pieces, or you could be missing the completely left side or the right side, and you're only playing with the half of the board, and the opponent might have more pieces than you. So basically, the strategy becomes very, very complex as you get better. Not better, but like the strategy is very complex because it's to that certain person. They have to do the strategy according to what kind of pieces they have.
What weapons are in their tool belt, right? What tools are in their tool belt that they're able to use, right?
Yeah.
Some guys don't have a strong two-handed backhand. They run around it, right? And they take a forehand. A question that I have for you, though, is there an argument to be had that if you aim big, you miss big?
If you aim big, you miss big. Like aim big as in like a target?
Yes. Meaning that. So the reason that I'm getting at that is we talk about visualization heavily, right? Something that we employ, I've seen big improvements by utilizing. Some of that is right before you hit the ball, visualizing where you want the ball to go. I think when and the reason I resonate with this, and I'm talking about this from experience, is I think when I started out and I had too big of a target, it really didn't allow me to even visualize or picture or try to aim where the ball was going. It was just, I'm hitting the ball and hoping that it falls in.
Right.
Rather than, even if my target today is a 6-inch diameter and before it was a 2-foot diameter and before that was 5 feet, isn't there something to be said that you still should have some sort of a target to be aiming at rather than using the whole court as your target?
Well, I think using the whole court as a target is not the right mindset you should go in with.
Yeah.
So when we talk about targets, for me, I think the lower level you are, you're thinking in zones and areas, and higher level you are, you're thinking in cones and and cup, and so I think basically you have a target. It's just that the target is actually a lot bigger, and you're thinking in zones. Let's say, for example, in tennis, you could divide the court in 3 pieces. The body, right side and the left side. So you're just aiming for that big area, and not just a cup or a cone specifically. So I think when I'm also coaching and practicing and training these players, I train them. I know you guys want to say something. Sorry.
No, I'm giggling and Angie's thinking the same thing. So Ange used to bring these little tiny cones to practice. Like I'm talking this big, and I'm like, what is this?
Oh, I
guy?
love those. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, what is this guy doing with these cones? And like the first couple of days that we were practicing together, he was like, "You're gonna hit the cone," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna hit the cone 10 times in a row." So we literally sat there back and forth, back and forth, back and forth till he hit the cone 10 times, and that's what really started dwindling my target smaller and smaller. But I will say, although I came with, I think, some athleticism that allowed me to play and pick up a racket and aim a little bit. My aim wasn't that great when I first started, but what made it better was decreasing the size of my target. That's really why I'm asking the question as a whole. Rather than, I think a lot of lower level players like that go out and play today, go out there, hit the ball, hoping it goes over the net, or hoping that it stays in bounds with no regard for where the ball is actually going. Right? Or they're just trying to hit it at somebody and hope that they miss.
Yeah.
So the reason I brought up the question is to give them like a tactical way to go about, okay, where can I aim? And then why am I aiming there? So I think that your reference was awesome of breaking it into thirds. I think that is super easy way to deploy it. And that was really where I started, was like, okay, are you hitting left, right, or down the middle? And why are you hitting it there?
Yeah.
Now, I know Angelo has kind of taught me the same thing in pickleball. We started with left, right, and middle. Now, if we're taking a step above that, now what are we looking at? Because now we're not necessarily at little tiny cones on the court, but we know that we can hit left, right, and middle. What are we looking at next? Are we using the zone tactic, as Sky talked about?
So target wise, if you're getting more precise with the targets, in tennis, it's a little bit different from pickleball. Although I haven't played pickleball that much, I probably played twice. That's it. But tennis balls are a lot heavier, and the spin rate and the way it travels. I don't know if it's faster initially, but it is. I think is it faster? Tennis balls are faster.
Faster. Yeah, the velocity and acceleration, linear is faster, and angular, the RPMs are faster.
Yeah.
Higher,
so what the reason why tennis is a little bit more coaching tennis is a little bit tricky is where you have to balance yourself on where to hit the ball and how hard you're going to hit the ball. And hard could be fast or spin or the depth of it too. And the thing is, like, the coach and the players have to balance that out. You could be very good at pinpointing somewhere, but if your power is not there, you're not going to be able to predict where your opponent's going to hit to, because they have too many options. If you're hitting 40 miles per hour, but you're pinpointing, they could get to the ball and rip it, cross court or down line, or hit a drop shot. They have too many options, and you have too many things to cover. So there's a certain point where you have to work on power and accuracy. But I do teach power first, because when you hit with enough power down the middle, the opponent should not be able to do the things that they want to do. So there's a couple things that you can do to get your opponents out of their comfort zone, and power is one of them. In tennis, there's height, where it's very tough to hit up here or down here and make the things. You could do things. You can make the opponents do whatever you want, but the thing is, one of those aspect is power. So when you want to get to a certain level and a higher level in tennis, power is something that I really teach, and going through the opponents, and then I try to teach them technical aspects on how to hit angles and deeper or shorter, and higher, and that's how I kind of build my players around power. Obviously, some players don't have power, and they have to rely on their footwork and speed. But I usually like to work with players who can generate power to a certain point. Yeah.
Angelo, are you there? I was going to ask you a question on how you think it's similar or different to pickleball.
Yeah, I'm very interested to hear that.
Sorry, I'm just messing with it. Yeah, so
You're good.
I first of all, I love that, Sky, with what you just said about power. I correlate into two elements: time and space. So you take time away from your opponent and you give yourself more time, or you increase the space between the ball and your opponent, and you decrease the space between you and the ball. So power would be one way to take time away from your opponent, right? Another way is you advance to the net. That takes time away from your opponent. You use more topspin because the ball bounces toward your opponent. You hit the ball closer to your opponent as far as the target, it takes more time away. So things like that. So we agree. We're just saying it a little differently. As far as pickleball goes, pickleball and tennis are really the exact same. It's the exact same.
Hot take.
And that's why, I've coached for, I don't know, 35 years tennis. And then I go into pickleball. Why can I coach pro players in pickleball? Well, because it's the same. It's just I came up with these 10 ways that you can correlate coaching pickleball from tennis. And one of them, the biggest thing, it's just, and Sky, you'd be a tremendous pickleball coach because it's just the mindset shift. For example, Sky, in tennis, I'll ask you this question. When you approach, for the most part in tennis, when you're coaching your players to approach the net, would you tell them to hit the ball slow or fast? Generally speaking, not a change up.
Generally, I want them to hit it fast.
Yeah.
Personally. Yeah.
And you want them to hit it kind of short or deep?
I want them to hit deep.
Exactly. In pickleball, it's the exact opposite. You want to approach the net by hitting a drop shot. You want to hit it soft and short. So the problem is when a tennis player, a good tennis player, plays pickle, they have to not only rewire their mind, they have to do the opposite of what they've done for years. They have to hit it soft and attack, go forward. And the only way you do that is, sometimes Novak and some other players, they do the change up drop shot and then they charge off the drop because they know they're going to cut off the angle.
Yeah.
You do that on every point in pickleball.
I see. So it's completely opposite. It's completely opposite of that.
Completely opposite. It's not even similar. It's opposite. And so, but once you kind of take the skill set and mindset that you already know being a tennis professional or a coach, and you re-engineer it, and that is why, tennis players are taking over pickle because they already have good habits. They just don't know when to use them.
I personally think that's very interesting. I haven't played pickleball to that level yet, but that's very interesting to hear.
I would say so. Yeah. So what I was going to say on that is, no doubt, there's times when you can come in on what would be your fourth shot and rip one back. However, Angelo is spot on that the major difference that I've seen playing with tennis players. So coming up, I got my ass whooped by anybody that came from tennis, right? They would just blow balls by me, through me. I'm like, what is going on? It's 11-0 and I'm out of there, right? The difference now is the soft game, is the ability to slow the game down, which I'll say many tennis players come from I'll say baseline dominant perspective of trying to power the ball around people or even through them, where Angelo's spot on is that soft game is a whole different element, right? So it's almost like you're playing powerful tennis, but need to have the soft game in your back pocket to activate when necessary. And I'll say that's definitely a gap where Angela and I talk about this ability to adapt or adaptability in general.
Mm-hmm.
Angela loves this concept, which I love too, that just resonates with me, of like molding like clay, right? So the question that I'm going to throw out there is, when you're teaching a player, are you having them go in with a very rigid game plan, or are you giving them things to look for that allows them to be that clay and really mold in the moment?
Was that a question for me?
I'll gear it towards you to start for tennis, and then I'll move it to Angelo to elaborate on, because this idea of clay has changed the way that I've played. It's allowed me to not be so focused on a strategy that I have going in, not be overwhelmed when the game plan's not going according to plan. And even if I'm down in the dirt and I'm down, let's say 6-0, or in tennis, you're down a couple sets, it's like, what am I doing to crawl back? How am I adapting to the way that this game is currently being played? Right?
Yeah, I love these questions. I love these questions. And I don't think I've ever gotten a question like that before, but the way the interesting thing about tennis is, when you get to a higher level, the strategy becomes easier. Actually, it's actually much, much easier, because players are very, very predictable in what they can do and what they cannot do. On the different scale, where if you're on a lower scale, it's very, very difficult to know what your opponent is going to do and what you're capable of in a match. So it's actually much easier strategically when you actually get to the top, and that's why it's more fun. It becomes more of a chess match and more of a mental game, because you can hit certain shots at certain given moments, and the probability of him or her hitting certain shots are very narrow sometimes. So you know how, like, in tennis, people say, "Oh, he was there before the guy hit the ball." Like, you kind of hear that term, is because you could predict, and the probability of a certain shot in a certain given moment is very, very, it's already there. The answer is there. And but the thing is, like, when I'm teaching juniors and they're not an elite player, I do not give them a specific strategy to go in with. And also pro players as well. For example, when I was coaching Chung, I would give him tips on what to watch out for. I wouldn't say, "Hey, do this exact strategy." I would say, "Hey, for example, when he was playing Nadal, for example, like, Nadal hits super heavy and the ball kicks up, but I felt like it was actually good for Chung, because he was actually very good at hitting the balls up here. So he went in to the match having more confidence with that." And another thing was,
Chung have a full Western grip, Sky, or did he have semi-Western?
So he actually had right before he saw me, or when I was coaching him, right before, he actually had an Eastern forehand grip.
Oh, wow.
But it was a very, very unique Eastern forehand grip. Now he went on to change that grip to a semi-Western. And when he was with me, he was a full semi-Western, just a regular semi-Western. But he was still having trouble, because he went through that grip change during when he was 150 in the world. That's also why he felt like he had IPS, because, like, he just didn't know which grip to use. But yeah, and but he was using semi-Western. And I think some of the other strategy I was talking about with Chung was, "Hey, look out, be careful of this guy's forehand down the line. He always likes to go there." So, like, it wasn't like, I wasn't shaping the whole strategy for him. He knew what to do. I just watched their game in that tournament, the opponent's match in that tournament, of what they're doing, what some possibilities that can happen in the match, but I wouldn't give them the whole strategy. Same thing with the lower level player, where if they have, if I'm teaching them, I always try to tell them, for now, you're still developing your game. And right now, the focus should be on you a little bit more, because when you hit the right shots, your opponents are going to struggle. But if you're so worried about what the opponent is going to do, you won't be able to hit your own shots. So, it's very difficult because it's so different for, each type of player. And if you're a top junior and you know what type of shots you're hitting, then I would tell them, hey, this strategy works well for you. And, there's some weaknesses that I see in that opponent, so you should use this tactic a little bit more. But, it's never like, oh, you have to follow this strict, strategy. It's never like that. It never turns out to be like that. So, yeah.
And do you have any comments? Are you going to? I loved everything that he had to say, and I resonated with it heavily. But I didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to build on.
I mean, Sky, I feel like I can talk shop with you all day.
Yeah, I love this. That's why I love this. You don't get a lot of chances to talk about these, deep mental game or strategy games with some of the coaches that even at the top, like some, I don't want to say who, but like some coaches at the top, they have no idea what they're talking about. So it's very difficult to start a conversation about these kind of,
Well,
yeah.
The thing with me was my mindset, my mental game was always my biggest asset, because I started tennis extremely late, even though I played table tennis with my twin brother since I've been 3 years old. So I developed the hand-eye and quickness, and just love for playing. We'd play hundreds of games a night, but then I picked up tennis seriously when I was a junior in high school, which is pretty late for all intents and purposes. And I never had a coach. So, or at least until I, got to, I had a high school coach and a college coach, but I'm talking a mental skills coach or a technique coach, So what I do was I just modeled my game after top pros that I liked. I just tried to mimic it and then figure it out. But speed and mental toughness, now I don't call it mental toughness anymore, because it's not about being tough. Like for example, Sky, do you go to the gym to build strength or toughness?
Oh, strength.
There you go. So I call it mental strength. I mentioned that in my book, Tenacity. But
that's great. Yeah, that's a great word.
Because toughness is brittle, and it's good when it's good, but it snaps under pressure. Anyways, again, we could talk for hours on that. But what my concept of this clay or water that Al is talking about, that Al and I talk about quite frequently, is you go in with a game plan, but the coach is guiding the player. You're not telling the player. You're guiding the player based on things that you might be aware of, that your player might subconsciously be aware of, but not consciously.
That's it. Yep.
Remember, this player is a lefty. So I'm coaching this double, and then we go into the third set, so I can coach him. And I said, I just have one question: why are you hitting to their forehand? Their forehand's their strength. And why are you hitting their forehand? And they said, I thought we were hitting to the backhand. No, they're lefties.
Oh, that happens so much. That happens so much. Yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay. There are moments, I will say, that you do have to tell athletes. Number one, I like what you said, Sky, about when they're juniors and they don't know enough and they need something. So then when they ask you, like, to tell you, okay, I'll tell you, but in the future, I'm not going to tell you. You got to figure it out. But here's what you got to do. And then the second is when they are so emotionally and mentally paralyzed that they can't think straight. And then you have to tell them. And I'll give you a real story with Serena and Richard Williams. So I was doing my high performance mental skills certification at USTA at Chris Everett Academy. I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. And I never forget, is I was there. We had the room of like 30 coaches from around the world. And there was this one particular coach that had interesting and exotic answers to the questions, and they weren't always on point. Created a group. We had to go into a group. We had to do a final exam on mental skills on court. And I'm saying to myself, oh, please don't put this coach in my group, please. And he was in our group. So I said, all right, well, let me be the leader. We got to do the final exam. Let me use every piece of what we learned and create this lesson plan on mental skills. We got to pass this, right? And so this person had referenced Venus and Serena all week long. So then he referenced it again when we're prepping for the final exam. And I said to him, I have a question. Did you coach like Venus and Serena? He's like, yeah. When Venus won Wimbledon, when she was at the trophy ceremony, she thanked me. I'm like, oh, okay. So what did like Serena do then, to win, or Venus? And, he's like, well, we just told her to hit side to side. And so I'm like, that's it? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, this is really important. Like this exam, we have to pass this. I don't think it's gonna work. We just tell everybody you got to hit left and then right and then left. So it's kind of like you said, Sky. The strategy gets more simplistic as you become a better player. So he calls. So his name is Jermaine. So he calls Richard Williams, gets Richard on the phone, brings the phone over to me. He's like, Richard, here's Angelo. Can you tell him the side to side, And so I asked him, I was like, well, is it true that you told Serena to hit side to side? He's like, yes, sir. I was like, why? That seems pretty big. He goes, exactly. Serena got so paralyzed emotionally. She was so emotional, especially before finals, that we said, you know what, Serena? Hit ball to the left. Then when you get it back, hit it to the right. And then when you get it back, hit it to the left. Keep doing that until you win the point. And so if you watch, in the middle of Serena's career, she hit everything left, right, left, right, left, right. But at that point, she was so powerful that she could hit the ball, like you said, take time away more powerfully corner to corner, that she had to just hit 3 corners and she won the point.
Right.
Then as she matured and was toward the twilight of her career, notice how she did re-hits. She hit left, right, and then right again, because she hit behind players because she realized that she wasn't overpowering them like she used to. So it was fascinating. So then after getting off the call, I hang up the phone, and I was the leader of the group, and I go, all right, guys, scrap all of what I said. We're going to tell everybody to hit it left and then right, left again. We're going to hit side to side, but we're going to call it the Serena side to side, and we all passed the exam. It was just hilarious.
Wow, that is
absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
A key component.
True story.
That's amazing. A key component in there that I want to highlight that you both commented on, a couple things. One, I resonate so heavily with that emotional paralysis, and I think every athlete does, right? There's moments where you're behind, you're getting your ass kicked, the nerves kick in even more. You're saying it's excitement. You're trying to convince yourself it's excitement, but you're nervous, right? So to Angelo's point in that, it's like simplify everything. Simplify the entire game. Just focus on yourself. Hit your shots. Get yourself back in there. Settle back in, and then continue forward more tactically. Because I've been there where, like, especially in my first couple of qualifiers, your nerves are high. You feel like everything's on the line. You've been working toward this forever. You finally have an opportunity, and now you don't want to squander it. But in that emotional state, you feel like you can't even think. You feel like you everything that you just knew flew out the window.
Yeah.
Right. So the best advice that I can give that Angelo commented on is keep it as simple as possible until you settle into the game and then think more tactically. Now, also building on that with what Sky said, and then Sky, I know you have something to say, so I'll let you comment.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
When you are early on your journey, And this is where my skill set had to catch up to where I was of way that I thought about the game, because I've just watched so many hours of pickleball and studied the game tactically heavily. But early on, if you get too lost in focusing on your opponents on the other side of the court, you're never getting those reps and building that skill set to actually hit the shot, right? So you do need to employ yourself to go out there and focus on yourself first early in your career, whether it is 2-5, 3-0, even honestly to 4-0, close to 4-5. Like, you're focusing on hitting your shots, regardless of if the opponent is there or not. Hit your damn shots. Then once now at the 5-0 level, now I'm looking on the other side of the court.
Yes.
Now I'm saying, what are their tendencies? What may their weaknesses be? What is even their paddle position? Where are they off balance on the court? Where can I catch them a little bit off balance? So now the chance that they hit a good shot back is low. So that all happens now after the fact of, I know I could hit most shots. There's a couple shots that I may only hit 5 out of 10 times, but I'm leaning on most of the shots that I get 8 out of 10 in any position on the court. Now I can focus tactically on the other side. So that is probably some of the best advice that I've gotten as a player as I've climbed through the ranks. And I thought that was a key component that Sky said, and Angelo commented on, that every single player needs to take through their journey, is focus on hitting your shot first, then focus on the opponents on the other side of the court, which is huge.
Yeah. And I think going back to a little bit of what you guys said about flow.
Yeah.
In my book, Art of War, Art of Tennis, I talk about how a player's strategic aspect and mental aspect has to be like water, because water could evaporate and become, evaporated in the air. You could become a flow of water, and then you could become ice. So you have to be, Sun Tzu talked about this, how strategic you have to be, very in flow of different adaptation to the environment and your opponents. So I love how Angelo said that. And I think also talking about the focusing on yourself and focusing on your opponent later, what I talked about in my YouTube channel is every person has a mental capacity, I believe. So when you, so mental capacity, when you have that mental capacity, and the first couple of years, you have to fill that mental capacity with you in that, thinking about yourself. So, but the thing is, as you go, you take some of that out and put strategic aspect into that mental capacity. And the thing is, like, the reason why you practice and do reps and repetitions is because you want that mental capacity to be dumped out. You don't want to be thinking about, technique in your in mentality. So you fill those gaps, like, because sometimes I had players where they're developing so fast and they were thinking about themselves, but it was all full and they didn't, they didn't know what to do. And sometimes it was the opposite. They did enough repetitions, they didn't even know what to think about now because everything was so natural. Now, then I took, the strategic aspect of it and put, strategy and tactics into his mental capacity. And now he has that, he could go back and forth with, mental capacity could go back and forth from strategy or technique. And that also is a flow. It's not always solid. You're not always thinking about strategy. You're not always thinking about yourself. It always has the flow of what you need. So I go with my players and really deep dive into what they need and analyze themselves to be able to analyze themselves. And the tennis players and pickleball is the same way. It's, you have to be able to do that yourself because the coach can't coach you. So I don't know about pickleball, but for tennis, you have to coach yourself and be your own coach. And you really have to be able to analyze yourself, what to think about. Is it me, or right now to dominate or compete, do I have to really think about me or my opponent? Like, they have to keep changing that flow. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Well, I agree with that. I just want to add, Al and Sky, that, your coach's voice, which is external when you first hear it, becomes their internal voice, right? And a lot of players have said to me, I had you in my head when I was playing this match or this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that to a certain extent, but the coach can't be the crutch. So I would love to coach my player to coach him or herself.
Yes, that's the goal.
They're the only person that's going to be present in every single one of their matches, tournaments, and practices. So I say, yeah, okay, temporarily you can hear my voice in your head, but eventually you got to make it your own voice in your head.
Yeah, and I talk about with my players, they always I think the first couple of years of my career, I had a tough time with my players because they would all rely on me, and I was really thinking, hey, this is great for my survival and my job, but like that's not the goal. And I started telling my players, the goal is to play well without me, not me not being there. So when I'm teaching you, you have to teach yourself how to adjust and how to teach yourself in certain positions. With me coaching you and giving you all this experience and guiding you, you have to be able to do that without me. The goal is to play well without me and not with me. So I keep on trying to not distance myself. I give them space so that they, when it's time, they could actually separate from me, and they're very independent players, and they don't rely on me as a player. So that's also what I try to do as a coach as well. Yeah.
And I totally on the same page. Just love that. I love that. There's an aspiring junior player. I was his mental skills coach, and one of the reasons I was brought on board was he could never win a tie break. Whenever it got to a third set tie break or even a first set or second set, he would lose. So you have the in between sets, you have that 3-minute coaching time, and he would call me. His parents would call me, are you going to be available in 10 minutes? I said, why? Well, because it looks like he's going to be losing the second set. And so believe it or not, we went 10 for 10. 10 times that he got me on the phone. He went 10 for 10 in tie breaks. So he won 10 third set tie breaks. The 11th, I was in the shower and I didn't get to my phone in time, and he lost. And it's exactly what you were saying, because I get out of the shower, I see like 6 missed calls. I'm like, what's going on? And but that's the thing. I felt really badly. I'm like, I wasn't there for him. And then I said, no, but I can't be a crutch. At some point, it's got to transition to that you're making the decision, you're making the call. And the thing I do with my players there, Sky and Al, is what I say is, okay, if I'm not reachable, or even if eventually I am, then why don't you do this? Do a role play. Ask yourself the question, and then answer the question how you think your coach would answer it.
Yes.
And then you're actually finding the answer, searching for the answer, and coming up with the answer yourself. Now you're owning the process of being the player and the coach. And I really believe that the player coach is the best player in the world. Yes, you still need coaches. I'm not saying you don't need coaches, but you need coaches to a certain extent. And then at that point, you got to be able to do it. And then I would say once the coach gets the player to that point, then you can coach on other things. Mm-hmm. You can coach on purpose and how you're going to leave a legacy in the sport. That's what the coach can help you with.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and it's not about just coaching and winning on the court, but I think the coach has a lot of say, because you gain trust. And I really believe that the coach should be a friend, family, and sometimes a father figure or whatever you need to be, actually. But the thing is, like, they're teachers. They're not just coaches, but they teach life as well. So I always talk about to my fellow coaches and younger coaches that are younger than me. They always wanted some mentorship, and I talk about how you have to be a certain role model, and not just you have to not be perfect, but you have to be a good person. You have to be be passionate, have compassion, like all this stuff, like not just tennis and not just sports, but you have to be shaping that player not only in tennis but to be a good person as well, I think. And I think and that does really well, I think, in media as well, like, because when you want sponsorships, you want someone that can represent your brand, right? And I think that's also very important, because financially, if you don't have that support, then it's very hard for you to go out there and play, unless you're like top in the world. But still, you still need to be a good person, I believe.
Yeah, I was just in prison this morning, and
he didn't break out of jail for this podcast. I promise you that.
Officer, let me do this podcast today. So I was there coaching pickleball, and high security prison, and it's my second time with these gentlemen, and it's more about life lessons, but you can't go too deep too quick. You got you got to start with something innocuous like the sport of pickleball.
Right.
And so I was teaching them the third shot drop. Al knows how difficult it is to hit the mini target. I had the mini targets out, and I was watching them do it, and they weren't quite getting it. And I'm like, let me show you. And on the second ball, I nailed the target on a third shot drop, and they're like, what? So then I said, but it's not the make that was important, the second shot. It was the fact that I accepted my first mistake as a mistake, not a failure, and an opportunity to then succeed. But you got to fail first to succeed, because if you don't allow yourself to fail, you won't allow yourself to succeed. And I really believe that in sports and in life. And I talk to them about the 7 controllables, your eagles. And, I've come up with that expression, focus on your eagles, your effort and attitude, gratitude, learning, enjoyment, sportsmanship. And then the silent F is focus on playing freely. And I said, look, your freedom is taken away right now. You don't have control over the mistakes you made that got you in prison, and you don't have control over the fact that you don't have freedom right now. So accept that. You may not like it, but accept that and focus on those 7 things that you can control. And if you focus on those 7 things that you can control, then that's where you can build your self-esteem back and your belief. And then before you know it, you're free. And if you're not out of here, then you're free in your own mind and your own heart. And, and it really resonates well with them. And then the second thing I'll say is last week or 2 weeks ago, I was in the juvenile facility, and they were very rambunctious, to put it politely. And so I brought them in. I said, look, I'm giving you my time and attention. And what I expect back is you're open to learning and you pay attention. That's all I want back. I don't care how good you become or not, but that's what I expect of you. And then one of a 20-year-old male inmate said, you mean you don't see us as as criminals? And I said, no, I see you as a person. And at that moment, you can hear the pin drop. I immediately got their respect, because I'm not judging them for why they're being in there, but I'm accepting, just like they are, that they're in there, and we got to make the best of a tough situation. And, so I couldn't agree with you more, Sky, is that tennis, pickleball, whatever it might be. It's like it's you're really teaching life lessons, but you're teaching them in a way that they don't see them coming, and sometimes that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I really enjoy coaching because of that, and it's and my brand, Road to Pro, we're here to change people's lives, but the first thing I did was coach, and the way I was changing players' lives, I really enjoyed that. So we wanted to just take it further, keep them healthy and help them financially, whatever we can do for these athletes. So yeah, I mean it's great. I think you learn a lot by teaching others, and I think a lot of these tennis players, when they're playing, they're so caught up about themselves, they don't know how to give back sometimes, because it's an individual sport. And when you start giving back and start teaching others, like you really learn a lot more, I think, than just taking. So I really asked some of the pro players and some top players, try to teach like these beginners and intermediate players, because you learn a lot from them. Because we all have the same bodies. A lot of them, we all have same range of motion. And when you really want someone to do well, you really think about them, and then you kind of realize, oh, I haven't been doing that, so then you kind of learn. So I really advise a lot of players in teaching, tennis, or teaching whatever they want to teach, actually. Yeah. So it's great. I love these kind of conversations, because it's not a you don't talk about this a lot in my normal life, I should say.
And I think that's why Angela and I connected so heavily when we first met, because we were really, really willing to dive into the details.
Mm-hmm.
And a piece that I want to comment on that you said was, I find myself, so every so often I'll teach now. So like I have a good friend of mine who's my barber, who asked me to spend an hour with him every so often on pickleball. He plays every night with the guys. Now he's getting his ass kicked by a couple of them, and now he wants to improve, right? But what I find going through those lessons is that there's so many fundamental foundational things that I don't think about anymore that I'm reminded of quickly. And to give you reference of what Angelo just talked about with missing on the cones. So something that he always resonated with me, which was awesome, is you're aiming at the cone, right? And you miss left by 6 inches. Well, you got to compensate and get your brain to calibrate by missing right 6 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me today, forgetting about that for a little bit, it's like you're missing your mark and you're just trying to keep hitting at it, right? It's like, I know I can hit the shot, keep hitting at it. Rather than, if I go back to my fundamentals, it's like, why am I missing left?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I now adapt to calibrate to hit my target? So what's so awesome about doing that is it's been more than just that, right? It's been some fundamental techniques that, even, let's say, for example, simple one, guy's hitting his third shot drop, as Angela just talked about, way too high, and then way too low. I'm giving him the lesson about apex on a pickleball. Well, you want your apex to be 2-3 feet before the net so that it's descending down into the kitchen or the non-volley zone in pickleball after the net. Well, for me, I had a stint going through where my third drops were a little high, and I'm just frustrated, being like, why are they high? Why are they not rolling correctly? Well, as soon as I gave that lesson, I go back to the court and I'm like, you know what? I just have to change my apex to my ball.
Yeah.
Just have to change it, right? So I resonate so heavily with that, because I'm doing that real time today and have just begun doing that probably 3-4 months ago. And it is the best thing that I could have done for my personal game. Best thing that I could have done.
Yeah.
So transitioning quickly here, but nothing too crazy. We talked about a lot of things at beginners, like a beginning level, and now also at a high level. But I at least want to give the high level players that are looking to play, 4-5 plus, even 5-0, even if they're on their road to pro, so to speak, right? What is one thing that they can add to their game now that would help them improve? Is it
And
tactical? Is it
oh my
strategic?
gosh, I love these
One
questions.
thing, you could only pick one.
I could only pick one.
I'll let you elaborate,
And-
but
and-
one general concept.
Oh my gosh. I was actually gonna say something while you were saying what you were
Go
saying.
for it. Go for it.
And then it turned into a question, and it was actually the answer that I was gonna say.
Perfect.
Yeah. So it's funny because when you're starting out, you need to learn all these fundamentals, and then when you get to the midpoint of your career, you have to learn the tactics and the strategy aspect of a sport. And one thing that I really focus on when you do reach that top level is actually going back to the fundamentals, because nobody's perfect. The things that you want to do at the higher level, you actually have to go back to the fundamentals and really dig, deep dive into what they're doing wrong that's stopping them from doing that. But a lot of times it's the fundamentals that stop them, is not something very special. And this is also the reason why I asked pros and these top level players to teach these little kids, is because you have to go back to fundamentals to like a statue or a sculpture. You have the layout, but now you go into detail, and you sculpt it out and you go into the detail, and those are all fundamentals. And going back to fundamentals, you find out a lot of things that you were doing wrong. The core thing that was wrong was actually like just the fundamentals, and if you fix that, like a domino, everything else just kind of lays into place also. So if you're at the top, you really have to think about the, first of all, fitness and everything else, that those are all important. I mean, those are fundamentals too, but
non-negotiables.
yeah, non-negotiables. But when you get to the top and you want to get even better, you have to go back to the fundamentals and work on the details. That's what I usually do with my players.
I love that. And I experienced that real time, so I am absolutely on board with that. Angela, what would be your one thing?
Being resilient. I remember in Roger Federer's recent commencement speech, got his diploma, he had said, which I kind of already knew this statistic, but he's arguably one of the greatest players of all time, and he failed 46% of the time. He lost 46% of every point he's ever played, and yet he found a way to win and be successful. And also Novak Djokovic has commented on this before as well. It's easier or easy to handle success or winning a point, but it's the mark of a true champion that can be resilient enough to come back and play the way you can after losing a point. And so I say building that resilience, and that resilience resides in your purpose and your self-belief.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the right purpose that's true to who you are, and you have the self-belief, then resilience becomes easier. But if you don't, I find that resilience becomes much more challenging. And finally, I'll end with a recent bronze medalist at the Summer Olympics. She said it's okay to really want gold, but not to need the gold medal. And I completely agree. I have 4 world records, 2 in tennis, 2 in pickleball. I don't need another world record, but I really want it when the purpose is beyond myself and something that I really care about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you that where you're reminded of that are those days where you don't want to get out of bed, you don't want to go to practice, and you do it anyways. And the reason you do it anyways is because there's a purpose greater than you, greater than just winning, greater than the gold medals, for the reason that you're being there and the reason that you're doing it. So to use myself as an example, and I'm sure you guys have heard me reiterate this before, with what Angelo and I are doing with the Fail First podcast and the project, is that I want to be the prime example for practicing what you preach, right? How can I expect myself to go out there and teach these things to people and not being applying it myself, right? I got to give them some sort of evidence and reassurance that what I'm doing and teaching is actually what I'm applying and actually what I'm using. It's not just fugazi, right? It's not just this mental fugazi. So with that being said, I want to be the prime example of taking exactly what I'm teaching and applying it, and also showing that really whatever you believe that you can do, like if you just start taking actionable steps towards it over a long time horizon, yes, some people maybe 2 years, 5, 10, over a long time horizon, the biggest thing is that you're really just outworking and outlasting your opponents. If it's in business or in life, it's like you're putting in the work and you're outlasting them more than anything. And that's where Angelo's talking about the resilient piece, right? If you can get up and learn something time and time again and fail over and over again and consistently be willing to fail first, you're going to see the results over a long enough time horizon. And that is just the facts, right? So something that I like to close with a little bit here is I like to ask, what is one failure that you had over your experience that was pivotal for you to get to where you are today? Is there one? It can be, obviously everybody's had many failures, but what is one that really you think of immediately that just changed your trajectory of your life?
I think I'm going through one right now.
Okay.
I think I'm going through one right now because I have no business background. My parents didn't have any businesses, and I've made so many mistakes in the past 2-3 years, financially. I think, and for me, I think I realized in order for me to help more people, I need to be able to um, be financially solid, like as a company too. So like I didn't really realize, I just wanted to help people. So I just like I, I just gave out money away actually. Like it's just when I first started, like when we were making it, I was just giving it to employees, we were giving it to players, like just like, oh, like take it, but like I realized like I made so many financial mistakes. I was like, wow, I really didn't take care of myself or the company. So in order for me to help more and the company to help more players, I really need to be, smarter with the financials. That's what I realized recently. Because, growing up, my parents supported me throughout my career, and I had no financial, background or education. So I really didn't know how to manage things. But I was really on the verge of bankruptcy, actually, like our company and myself. And that really changed me, actually. And I think going through that, it's not a very pleasant experience because it's not just me now. I have my wife, I have my 2 kids, and there's people relying on me. So I realized, wow, I really have to I really have to change. And as an athlete growing up, there's so many adversities that you're gonna face, and I think the best thing that can happen to you is actually adversity, I think. So the tougher the time gets, you have to really think of that as a blessing. I know it's very hard to, but at later on, it really becomes and shapes who you are. So yeah, I think I just went through that past 2-3 years, and I'm much stronger mentally and physically now. So I've been blessed with that. So yeah. So
I think that, listen, I think there's so many takeaways there. I will say the why I think just athletics in general is so great for what you just spoke about is that you get to fail over and over again at minimum cost, right? there's no cost associated to you failing in athletics. You get to go out there, you get to lose, you get to win, you get to experience both sides and do it over and over again and learn from it. So even if you have limited athletic ability, I would challenge anybody to go out there and try, because you are going to build that resilience with minimum cost associated, or honestly, minimum responsibility after you have lost, right? You get to go out there and do it again, and in 3 months, you're going to forget all about it. And yes, your friends may make fun of you in school for getting your ass kicked once or twice, but who cares, right? You're doing it for yourself, to build yourself into the best version of who you are. So, Sky, I appreciate you sharing that with us, especially because it's so recent and so fresh, and it is so relatable. And for you to be that transparent, there are so many businesses that are going through the same thing. And for them to listen to that and know that there's somebody else out there who just go through it and have now come out on the other side, I think is super, super powerful, honestly. Angelo, so we've talked about many things that you have overcome, many failures that you've had that got you where today. But what's one that sits on the top of the mind for you right now?
I hope it wasn't too many. So August of 2007, our first world record attempt to honor our deceased tennis mentor, Scott. And at 5:09 a.m., I'll never forget, I fell asleep hitting a forehand and hit the ball on the top of the net. And so, at that moment, I made a vow to myself that if I was going to honor someone's legacy, that I was going to take more care in the preparation and make that my number one, even though it wasn't for me, it was for someone else. And so since then, I'm now 4 for 4 with world records and haven't missed a tennis or pickleball in over 70,000 shots. And each of the records ended on purpose. I didn't miss the ball, but we had the record in hand and I literally caught the ball. So, I would say 2000.
I think for you to go from that point to not miss a shot since speaks volumes of it. And I know I would have loved to have Sky have been at Pickleball America, but something oh my God, yeah. So something that I like to speak about, and the reason I want to emphasize this is because we always want to continuously emphasize purpose, because it's what's going to drive you, get you out of bed every morning when you don't want to get out of bed. Being in that room, and Angelo, I know you're going to feel this in your chest when I say it again, but it brings me back every single time. Being in that room after they completed the world record and seeing not only the emotion on them, but the euphoria feeling of the weight that it held when it was completed, was, words just don't do it justice, right? You feel it in your chest. You feel emotional yourself in that moment. And that's where you don't necessarily understand why you are emotional, but what just happened holds a lot of weight. And that comes from why it was being done in the first place. That comes from the heavy amount of purpose. Not only was it for raising money for Save the Children, but Angela and Annette did it for their mother that they lost a couple of years ago. So you felt that purpose in that room. And that is what not only changes the way that you move throughout every single day, but it changes every person in that room, the way that they go about their next day and the day after that. It now has them thinking about, what can I do? Right? You're inspiring others to do the same thing. So I appreciate both of you sharing those stories of failure, because that's exactly what we're doing here. We're trying to impact and inspire as many people to go do the same thing and be resilient themselves and fail first themselves. So with that being said, Sky, is there anything that you may want to talk about that we didn't touch on? Maybe anything that you got going on, or even where can people find you today if they want to go learn some of your coaching tactics, or even get a pair of the best socks on the market? Not even kidding.
I love, and thank you for that. And I love talking about tennis and helping people tennis related, but I'm not very good at doing ads for my own company or myself.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good promoter. But I mean, you could find us at rtptennis.com, RTP Tennis on our Instagram, and YouTube channel also RTP Tennis. So if you want to find more information or know more about me or some of the coaching philosophies that I have, you could find me there. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to be on the show again. I mean, have more conversation with you guys. It was so much fun today. Yeah.
That is an absolute guarantee, Scott. And I will tell you, when we had our call the other week before we recorded, I show up to the pickleball court. Angelo and I had a good opportunity to play with one of his old coaches and then Yvonne Lendl.
Uh-huh.
First thing Angelo says to me, he's like, I could talk to Sky all day long.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
oh my God. He goes, I could talk to him all day long. When are we talking to him next? When the podcast is going to be? I'm like, listen, we'll have him on the podcast next week. Don't you worry.
That's
So,
awesome. Did you play with Yvonne Lendl?
Yeah. So we played
I
with
worked
him.
for him. So I know him from, I worked at his academy for a while.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, he was a character. Let me tell you. So I had a good opportunity to play on the other side of the court against him, and also by his side with him. And they are both fun. He is the perfect combination of competitive and fun.
Oh yeah.
Because he wants to win, no doubt. Like there is no other option when he's on the court.
Yeah.
However, when he does lose a point or he does get beat, he is the guy who is the ball breaker, but in the best way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having fun with it, messing around with you, really hoping that you're enjoying also competing while you're out there, which was the best part of playing with him, because not only was he looking at me dead in the eyes and say, we're down by 5 points to Angelo and one of his former coaches. And he looks at me and goes, we're getting 5 points right now. There's no other option. We're getting 5 points right now. And me, I'm like, I better get 5 points or I don't know what's going to happen after this game. So we go out there. We made a run. I think we ended up coming back and winning in extra points. However, the intensity from him is felt. But on the other side of the ball, when I was on the other side, he was the first person to break my chops when I was letting balls go. Meaning I let a couple balls go that he ripped and they went long. And he's like, oh, you're not going to hit that back at me like a man would? I'm like, you're right. Maybe you're right there. But I thought it was strategically the right call. But he's a really good character. I had a lot of fun with him. Was very thankful for the experience. And I will tell you, anybody that is quote unquote a 5-0 player and thinks that they're going to walk all over Yvonne because he is 62 now is dead wrong, because he's going to rip forehands at you. Oh, yeah. He has super fast hands. And the biggest thing that I will tell you, we've talked about this ability to adapt and like even on top of that awareness, his IQ on the court is beyond what I could even say. Yeah. I would take
stories with him too, actually. Just quick, the reason why I say that, or the reason why I knew he was very competitive when I first met him, before I worked for him, the first thing he did was, hey, let's play some tennis. So I went to play, and right away he wanted me to play points with him. And, you know, he was super competitive. He just did not want to lose. And I beat him 5 times in a row in points. And he was just going crazy. And then during the break after that, he finally said, oh, you know how to play. I'm like, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I know how competitive you can get. And but off the court, he's great. Like, you know, he's a gentleman again. So it's awesome. Yeah, he knows how to turn it on and off. So
yeah, it was super cool to see. And like I said, the biggest thing was obviously played against him and not with him on the other side. But I felt like he was in my head sometimes as my partner, because I'm seeing space, returners coming in late. I'm taking that space, meaning I'm driving the ball. They're going to be off balance coming in. Mm-hmm. And it's like he knows exactly what I'm going to do without even looking at me. Mm-hmm. So which makes sense is that he is seeing the game not only the same way as me, but a step ahead, which is that next level of chess versus checkers. And that's also where, and this is a whole different topic, but that's also where when people are talking about partnerships, specifically in doubles, like you have to go through working with people to understand if you guys are, when they talk about chemistry, that's really where like chemistry comes from, is it's like, are you understanding what your partner is going to do next? Right? Can you really be predictive of what they're going to do? If you're on the court with somebody to the left of you and you have no idea what they're going to do next, it's very challenging to find chemistry and work through it, because like your tactics, your strategy, the way that you're seeing the game is just not in sync. And that's really why I would say, like, challenge yourself to play with a bunch of different players, because you're going to inevitably find somebody where the way you see the game is very similar and you're able to kind of work and build off that. Ange, is there anything left that you want to comment on? Okay, I will let you go. Sky, I promise you, we will definitely have you on the pod again. This was awesome. And maybe you'll even grab us to be on your podcast too. We'll do a little bit of,
that'll be awesome. Yeah.
a little vice versa here. But either way, thank you so much for your time today. Such awesome stuff. But I'll let you guys go. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having us.
See you.
Bye.